Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to From Noise to Narrative, 4 ways to cut through the chaos that is 2026. Drop a note, an emoji, a comment in the chat if you are feeling a little like the world is on fire. We are here for you, particularly those of you who are planning events, trying to put things together while it can feel like a lot is falling apart. The economy, geopolitics, cuts and changes with AI. It is a lot. And we know it is affecting how you are all trying to do business. And we're here for you. I'm Melanie Marshall. I am joined by Kim Menninger, leadership expert, Dr. Heather Collins, cognitive neuroscientist, and Yvonne Furneaux, corporate survivalist. We make up the North Star Speaker Collective. We are four leaders in our own fields and keynote speakers who work on the idea of how we take chaos and make it into a thread you can actually work and weave with, no matter what's going on around you. So we wanted to come to you today and actually give you some practical tips on how to transform whatever you're in and move forward. So hopefully that sounds good to all of you. We're excited to be here. But the goal is that you're going to leave with at least one concrete idea, one connection of something. Oh, maybe I could try that. Maybe that's a person I can reach out to. One spark that you can go away and noodle on and come back and say, all right, you know what? I've got a new idea for how I can make it through. Because we all know that this isn't easy. Ladies, raise your hands if you've had an unexpected turn so far this year. Yeah? Yeah, we've all had it. I know you're out there raising your hands too. We will be offering a replay of this. We'll be sending out materials afterwards, but I would invite you to take notes, to be as present as you can. I'm sure you've all got 30 tabs open above you. We want to be as of service to you as possible. First up today, let's start with how to build a better brain. If you feel like your brain is melting down under the weight of change, you're not alone. I've learned a lot about this from co-hosting my YouTube show, What Is She Thinking, with Dr. Heather Collins, cognitive neuroscientist, 3-time speaker recently at South by Southwest, and that doesn't happen very often. We should have used the applause sound here on LinkedIn. And she knows a lot about how we can hack our brains to keep them from turning to sludge and keep them functioning. And when our brains function better, Dr. Heather, then we can actually make them function better with others, plan better events, get through all of this better. That's my understanding. I would love to hear how you're going to help people through.
Absolutely. And there is hope. We do have a way through the chaos of 2026. And we're here to help you do that today. We're here to help you find a way forward through the chaos. And one thing I'm going to share with you is how to reclaim your brain in the age of AI. And especially when we're planning events, sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking that more is better. But more actually isn't better. More just causes cognitive overload. And cognitive overload is not engagement, it's erosion for your brain. And a lot of times when we feel that cognitive overload, our answer is to turn to AI for all the solutions and all the answers. But we still have questions about how we should be interacting with AI. And a recent Pew Research Center poll showed that 53% of US adults believe AI can actually harm creative thinking. And that's exactly what we need when we're planning events and we want engagement. We want people to be excited and participated. We need creative thinking. So there are 3 problems associated with overuse of AI or inappropriate use with AI. And that is fluency bias, cognitive offloading, and miscalibrated confidence. And we're at a fork in the road right now with AI. We can go on the path of brain drain, where it actually harms our ability to think creatively, or we can choose the path of brain gain, where we actually use AI to enhance our creative juices and really help our brain do the complex, interesting, fun things that it does the best. And as I talked about, there are a few problems with AI, and I think there's actually a great way to illustrate this. So, as Melanie said, I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, and as a scientist, I love to do experiments. So, let's do a little experiment right now. I'm going to flash a word on the center of the screen one at a time. And you're just going to say out loud to yourself or to whoever's around you the name of that word. So, for example, this is red. Now, the catch is that some words are going to be printed in the same color as the word. This is red, printed in red. And other colors are going to be printed in a different color. So I want you to say the color it's printed in, not the name of the color. So for this one, you would say green. Okay. Are we ready to go? Let's go. Okay, what did that feel like? Go ahead and talk with somebody you know about this, or put in the comments what that felt like. I'd love to hear what your experience was. And you probably thought, oh, that was really difficult when I had to actually say the word and there was a mismatch. And this is exactly the fluency bias. It's really easy when things match up, but when things are complicated, then things get more difficult to process for your brain. And that's when we need to stop and take a step back and really engage in critical thinking. And that means not letting AI do all the heavy lifting. So I have a collaborative thinking framework that can help all of us when we interact with AI specifically, and when we're just trying to do complex things in the universe. And it's a 3-part process where we're going to construct, challenge, and create. So the first step is construct. We have to build our mental model first. Now, if you're using AI, this means you can ask it a lot of questions. You can ask it, what is the capital of some country? You can ask it what it knows about a certain event venue that you're looking up, or a certain city that an event's going to be in. And the next step, you're going to take a step in a different direction. And you're going to ask AI to prompt you back, because AI shouldn't just teach you. It should actually audit your thinking. And this is the challenge phase, where you adjust your confidence and your decisions. So this is where I have a series of prompts, and you can use these prompts and basically have AI prompt you back. Every time you prompt it, it should be prompting you back. It should be challenging you, asking you questions, asking you to adjust your thinking, asking you to validate your models and test them and challenge them. And this is also the place where you adjust your confidence and decisions. If AI never challenges you, then it's not a partner, it's just a pacifier. And lastly, we get to the create stage. Now, this is the part we love. This is where we don't just refine our thoughts, our processes, and our projects and plans with AI. We actually start to generate. And this is when we engage in deep critical thinking skills. This is when we engage in creativity. And the thing that propels us forward with this is curiosity. So the first step in creating and creative thinking is curiosity, asking questions about what's next. What if what if that happens? What if these people say this? Then what's my next step? And that's when you really catch on fire. This is when we stop reviewing and start generating. And this is where everything comes together in your brain. This is when your prefrontal cortex, that massive area at the front of your brain, starts becoming activated. And that's really important, because your prefrontal cortex is responsible for decision making, thinking, problem solving, creativity, innovation, all of those wonderful creative juices that help us put on amazing events and help us do what we do well. This is when your memory capacity actually grows. This is your brain's hippocampus. It's deep in the center of your brain. If you were to just poke your finger in and go about 2 inches farther, stop, you'd hit it right in the center of your brain. And this is your brain's memory making center. And when you engage in that creative thinking, you actually fire this little structure up and increase your memory capacity. And this is where your anterior cingulate cortex gets tickled. Now, this little guy in the center of your brain is your brain's gatekeeper. And this gatekeeper says, is information going to get shut down in my brain? Or am I going to push it off to the prefrontal cortex where I can do really cool things with it, like problem solving and creative thinking? And by using this model and by interacting with AI, you actually produce more activation in your anterior cingulate cortex and push information to your prefrontal cortex. This is all about collaborative thinking with AI, because AI should think with you, not for you. So we construct, we challenge, we create, and this is how we move forward in a productive way with AI. But this model isn't just about collaborative thinking with AI. This is also how we engage in collaborative thinking with each other. Because in the end, better brains build better worlds.
Heather, thank you so much for that. I think some of that made our brains hurt. I know that I immediately got all of those questions wrong. I started doing the red, purple, no, orange. I'm sure a few of you who were doing that along with us. And then you start to think, this is why I need to work on my own brain before I give it over to AI. One of the things that I loved the most there was when you were talking about curiosity, about being driven by your own curiosity, what you have inside of you before you turn it over to somebody else. And that made me think about leadership, which is the specialty of the next member of the North Star Speaker Collective, Kim Menninger. We call her the General. It's when we think of ourselves as the A team. This is who she is. Kim is an MBA. She is the host of the Imposter Syndrome podcast, which is how I met her, which is very high up on the old, percentage of podcasts listened to worldwide. I have actually been there when Kim has been stopped by rabid fans, which you never know from meeting her. Kim, you know so much about how we get in our own way and what needs to happen for us to get out of our own way in order to be present to the challenges that are around us, putting together an event, being in a meeting that might be going wrong because of all of the chaos. And I think, would it be fair to say that you'd see the biggest challenge that we're all facing now as being the internal one that's out in front of us?
Absolutely, I would. Yes. And I would love to start today with an introduction to a few characters. So bear with me for one moment, please. And I want you, as I'm giving you a little bit of background on these people, I want you to think about whether you recognize them in yourself or in others around you. The first is Rose. Rose was recently promoted to a senior executive level role within her organization. She is one of the longest tenured leaders in her company. She is widely respected for her institutional knowledge and her long track record of success. And her leadership team is very confident in her ability to take on this new role. Rose, however, is not so sure. She's feeling really insecure about this change right now. When Rose is at her best, she's very collaborative. She has strong cross-functional relationships. She's got a great team. She's also very creative. She brings an innovative approach to problem solving, and she's fun to be around. People love her sense of humor. But Rose has another side, a side that emerges when she's under a lot of pressure. And that looks like impatience. She becomes more short-tempered. When she feels the need to prove herself, when she's feeling insecure, she will dominate and start talking over people, leaving people feeling like, what's the point of even contributing? Rose has already made up her mind, which makes her come across as very closed-minded. Now I want to introduce you to John. John is a business development leader. So he is great at the sales side of business. And John, when he is at his best, is very confident. He has a very strong leadership presence. He's also very direct, and people appreciate his honesty. And he's a great fixer. He's very solutions oriented. Now, John also has another side that emerges under pressure. And in that case, as he is under pressure today, because he's worried about making his number, he is feeling the effects of some of the economic uncertainty that we're all feeling. Some of his key clients have started pulling back on spending, and he's worried about whether or not he and his team are going to be able to make their number. Now, when he's under this kind of pressure, he can be very demanding, not just with his own team, but also across his organization. He can also be very aggressive. He's been known to pound his fists on the table. He's been known to raise his voice, which can be really intimidating to people. And finally, we have Anna. Anna is a rock star performer. She is your proverbial A+ student. She's feeling really nervous because she's been put on a project team with people who she thinks are smarter and more qualified than she is. When she's at her best, she's thoughtful. She's such a good listener. She catches details that other people miss. She's very proactive, and she has a big picture way of looking at the world. But when she is under pressure, as she is today, she becomes very quiet. She starts to second guess herself. She gets very hesitant, and she becomes perfectionistic. She starts to obsess over things that are good enough as is. Now, the reason I share these with you is because I want to illustrate the fact that each one of us brings these opposing sides of ourselves to our workplace situations. There's the best version of ourselves. That's the one that shows up when we are most confident, we're firing on all cylinders. It's the version of ourselves that we hope will show up in the moments that matter most, like the big meeting, like the tough conversation. And I'd love for you to think right now about some words that describe you when you are at your best. If you wouldn't mind sharing some of those in the chat. But as you saw when I introduced you to some of these people, there is also another side of ourselves that emerges, and that is the triggered version of ourselves. It is one that emerges when we are under pressure. And as Mel shared at the top of this conversation, we are under tremendous pressure today at so many different levels. If we look at the anxiety created by AI, we're looking at economic uncertainty, geopolitical instability, not to mention our everyday stresses like caregiving and endless to-do lists. It's no wonder that we're all under so much stress. And when we're under pressure, we don't show up at our best most of the time. We engage in controlling behaviors. We become procrastinators, perfectionists, people pleasers. We speak when we should be listening, or we get quiet just when our voices are needed most. And I would love for you to be brave and vulnerable and share some of the words that describe you when you are triggered as well. I also want you to think for a moment about what happens when a critical mass of the people around you, whether that is your team, whether that is the event that you're leading, the broader community that you're part of, are all showing up regularly in this triggered state, right? We start to notice that collaboration starts to collapse, that trust starts to erode, that conflict starts to increase, and productivity starts to decline. But it doesn't have to be this way. I've created a system that I want to share with you in a moment that's designed to help us shift from reactive triggered mode into intentionality more quickly. And I'm going to share with you the system here. Bear with me for one moment here. So it starts with listening to your body. The first indication that we have been triggered is a physical sensation like your chest constricting, your breathing getting more shallow, or your heart rate increasing. And I like to refer to these symptoms as your body's check engine light. It is the first indication that something is up. As soon as that check engine light goes on, you want to take some deep breaths and just push the pause button. And that leads us to the second step, which is to examine your triggers. As soon after that check engine light goes on as possible, what you want to do is you want to ask yourself, what just happened? Why did I react that way? What is the story I'm telling myself right now? And is there a different way to think about it? Oftentimes, our triggers stem from experiences that happened long ago in our childhoods even, and we don't stop to think about whether the way that we navigate those triggers still serves us today. When we don't examine our triggers, they dictate how we show up in the world. They keep us playing small or engaging in behaviors that we're not proud of. And it's important because when we understand our triggers, we can better anticipate and prepare for that. Now that leads us to aligning with your values. When we show up at our best, it's often because we are showing up in alignment with our values. But in order to do that, we have to know what those values are. And we are often moving at such a rapid pace that we're not stopping to reflect on which values do we want to prioritize at any given time. Here are some questions for you to think about that can help you do that. Ask yourself, how do I want other people to experience me? What do I stand for? And what do I want people to say about me when I'm not in the room? These questions help reveal information that helps us make better choices. Now, we won't always get it right. There will be times when we are too stressed out or exhausted that we miss the moment, or we don't feel psychologically safe enough to show up that way. But when we have that information available to us, we are much more likely to follow through on it. And the great news is that when we behave in alignment with our values, no matter what happens, we are far less likely to experience shame or regret, because we can always say that we did what we believed was the right thing to do in the moment. And then we've got developing an actionable plan. It's really important to think about what you are going to do to manage yourself when you're triggered, before, during, and after. What are you going to do to mitigate the triggers? What are you going to do in the heat of the moment? And what will you do after the fact if things don't go according to plan? Finally, think about how you can support others. There's a lot of inner work in what I'm describing. However, we are in a shared journey as humans. And if we can do this work collectively, it will be more effective for all of us. That means normalizing stress and pressure so that we feel like we can safely acknowledge it. And it means sharing our triggers and values with each other so that we can understand each other's behaviors and better hold each other accountable. Now, we cannot change the chaos that's going on around us, but we can control how we show up in response to it.
Thank you so much, Kim. What I loved about that, Tanya Dixon, thank you so much. You were talking about, like, when you're at your best, it's that perspective. We're seeing all sides. And when we're under that pressure, feeling impatient, being more direct. And the reason I comment on that one is because I know I'm like that as well. And I have been like that in my career. I think that makes us a rose. Is that right, Kim?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah. So I think there's probably a few of us listening who may have been roses in our time. Yeah, I think being in high pressure industries like events and meeting planning, it tends to bring a few roses to the table. So thank you for sharing that. As Yvonne was just sharing with us, it tends to bring a few of us to the table who have that tendency, and there are ways to manage it, which is so wonderful. I think where that brings me is that, like, we don't just experience this as individuals, though, right? Like, we are in this collectively, as you point out, because it's the impact we have on other people. And our next speaker, Yvonne Furneaux, definitely knows that. I sometimes call her the Grim Reaper because she's so, like, I always imagine her riding in on a motorcycle. She's a corporate survivalist. Think of big corporations who've been through change. United Health Group, Target, Weight Watchers. She knows what it means to trim the fat. I'm so sorry. I had to go. I'm sorry, Yvonne.
That's what Ozempic is for.
Yeah, well, that's where we've gone now. But I mean, you have been through all of these big changes where there's been this uncertainty. Corporations have had to try and bring culture through change, and either done it successfully or not so much. And I know the other thing that you have done is being a meeting planner who has had to create events that work in times of uncertainty. So I'd love to hear what you have to share with people doing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Mel. So before I get into any of that, I really want everybody in the audience to imagine something with me. I want you to imagine that you work in a corporate office with about 50 other people. You come into work one morning just like any other. You grab your coffee and you say hi to your best friends at work. You go about your day at your desk when all of a sudden you receive an unexpected email from HR. And this email instructs you and everyone else in your office to go to a conference room at a designated time. No agenda, no explanation, and now the office is completely on edge. And when the hour arrives, you and all of your colleagues squeeze into a conference room and huddle around a table, standing room only. Then a voice greets you over the speakerphone. It's a voice you've never heard before, a mystery HR person at your parent company, a company that, by the way, has just acquired yours in another country. The voice tells you that when you leave the room and go back to your desk, you should check your email. If you have an email from me, she says, today is your last day. Pack up your things and turn in your badge. And for everyone else, congratulations for now. So the call ends and everyone bolts out of the room and scatters like ants. Now, if you're a Gen Xer like me, you might remember that scene in Seinfeld where George is at the kid's birthday party and there's a fire and he starts knocking over women and children to get out. So you can imagine it a bit like that. Well, somehow you, as you exit the room, sense it before you even get back to your desk. And sure enough, you have the email from someone you've never met in another country determining your fate. Now, that was me 18 years ago. A company acquisition, an anonymous voice telling me that I didn't have a job anymore. And if you can hear what's going on here, there's actually thunder here in Chicago, so that was perfect timing. But I can remember it just like it was yesterday. And for a long time, I called it a communication failure or a leadership failure, even a moral failure. But I came to understand that it was something more than that, something else entirely. 18 years ago in that job, I was powerless. I was in the dark. I really just didn't have any visibility. There was this metaphorical chasm between the people who were making the decisions and the people who were living with the impact of those decisions. And I didn't have the language for it then, but I do now. I call those chasms ghost gaps. Now, if you know me, you know I love Halloween, so I love that I can call these ghost gaps, but there's a reason for it, so bear with me. But the ghost gaps are the hidden divides in your workplace that nobody talks about, but that everyone can feel. They're hidden divides that determine how much access you have, how connected you feel, not just to the company, but to each other. And the ghost gaps grow in the space between people, the space between teams. And quietly, invisibly, the ghost gaps can sabotage your culture, your clarity, and even your career. Not because anyone means for them to, but because they're structural. They live in the systems. They haunt the literal and figurative distances of the workplace. Now, the truth is that every workplace is an ecosystem. We probably all lived in it, right? It's a complex network of people and roles and norms and technology and physical spaces. Every ecosystem has gaps, and some are just wider than others. And what you experience inside that ecosystem isn't random. It's determined by where you sit, who you know, what team you're on, what type of work you do, whether you're in the corporate office or on the factory floor, whether you're in the room or you're on a screen 3 time zones away, or in my case, in another country entirely. It's why 2 people can work in the same organization and have wildly different experiences. And the ecosystem, you could probably attest to this, it doesn't always reward talent. It rewards proximity and visibility. And when those things are unevenly distributed, which they always are, it just makes the gaps grow wider and wider. Now, some people can bridge those gaps fairly easily, but for other people, the barriers can really make it seem impossible. And we're all feeling the weight of those gaps right now more than ever. Employee engagement in the US fell to its lowest level in a decade last year. Only 31% of employees are engaged. Only 1 in 3 people feel engaged at work. That's crazy. And more than half are looking for a new job. But that's not a people problem, it's a gap problem. Because the wider the gaps get, the lower your engagement gets. And engagement ties directly to financial performance and retention and your ability to lead through whatever comes next. Now, no matter where you are in the ecosystem of the workplace, we all experience the impact of the gaps in one way or another. Now, maybe you've been on the wrong side of one of these divides. I don't know about you, but I had enough of these feelings when I was in junior high, let alone when I'm at work. You've probably felt invisible and voiceless at times, even in organizations where you were giving it everything you had. So think about the people on your team right now, who gets to be in the room and who's being pushed forward or held back, not because of their talent, but because of where they sit in the system. Now, when people live on the wrong side of one or more of these divides for long enough, they disengage, they disconnect, they leave, or worse, they hang around and they just stop trying, or they even actively sabotage things at work. I've identified 6 ghost gaps that create these divides, and they all have to do, again, with access and connection. The power gap is who gets to make decisions and who doesn't. The investment gap happens when training and development and mentorship go to some people, but they really bypass the people who could use it most. The opportunity gap, that determines who gets high-profile projects and internal job opportunities. And when it comes to connection, the purpose gap shows up when some types of jobs and the people who do them are really disconnected from the big picture. Now, the information gap causes this information asymmetry. It's uneven flow through the organization. So that means some people know things that other people don't. And the visibility gap determines who gets recognized and celebrated and seen, while others go completely unnoticed. Now, 18 years ago in that conference room, I was on the wrong end of the power gap. I had no say in what happened to me. I was on the wrong end of the information gap because I had no idea. And I was definitely on the wrong end of the visibility gap because I was completely invisible to the people making decisions about my life. But I've seen ghost gaps kill morale and push great people out the door. And I've been one of those people, not just then, but at other times. And I've sat across from leaders who didn't see it coming, because not because they didn't care, but because the gaps were just invisible to them. Now, I know we're here today to talk about chaos, and chaos doesn't create ghost gaps. Chaos exposes them. And what you're experiencing now, this noise, the uncertainty, the sense that something is off, but you can't quite name it, it's not new. It feels new because the chaos is loud, but the gaps underneath it have been there, quietly growing in the space between good intentions and bad experiences, between the leaders and the people they lead. So what feels like noise right now is just your culture telling you exactly where the cracks are. Now, I was navigating chaos not just 18 years ago, but 18 months ago. 18 months ago, I was a VP at a publicly traded company, and we were going through a tough financial situation like so many other companies, and we had to do layoffs. I was a senior leader directing communication plans, framing the narrative for the CEO, and trying to do a very hard thing with as much care as possible for the people who were affected. And then one day, my boss called a meeting. The room was different this time. There was no physical conference room, just a virtual one, just my boss and me across the country from one another, alone on our laptops. And she told me something that I wasn't surprised to hear this time. She told me that my name was on the list, the very list that I was helping to create. But before I could go, I had to finish the job. Yes, I had to lead my own round of layoffs, and there is the thunder again, right on cue. So it turned out that this time I was on the wrong end of some gaps, but even though I was on the right end of others, I was simultaneously somehow in the room and in the dark. 18 years apart, two different chairs, yet it was the same result. But here's what those two chairs in 18 years taught me. The ecosystem has gaps, but you don't have to fill them with your silence or your self-doubt or your resignation. They've always been there, but so have you. And you have agency in this ecosystem, probably more than you even realize. And seeing the gaps and naming them is the first step. When you can name them, that's when the noise starts to become a narrative. That's when you can stop reacting to the chaos and start reading it. So ask yourself in your organization who is or isn't in the know, who is or isn't being seen right now. Maybe it's you. And ask yourself who's engaged and who's not, and why. Why is that? And most importantly, ask yourself, now that I see the gap, what am I going to do about it? Because the truth is, you cannot change what you can't see. You just have to know where to look. And with that, I'll toss it back to Mel.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. I couldn't love that more. I think, Susan has commented that chaos exposing the gaps is powerful. I agree, absolutely. Sometimes we think this has all just come on us, and actually it is, uncertainty has been here forever, and now we're able to see it. And I think you've highlighted that it exposes it, and it also exposes the cost of it. And that if people are putting events together, this is an opportunity to take advantage of it and change that and close those gaps to make a better product, to make a better team. Yeah. And that's something, I definitely know that I've seen that in my experience, right? Covering war zones, very different world, but totally similar experience.
Yeah, sometimes work can feel like a war zone, Mel. So you've got that right. And as someone who's planned leadership summits and big events like this, you're always trying to determine what's the right message that my audience needs right now. And Mel, I think your message is really important for people right now. I know you mentioned you've been in war zones, but everybody should know that, Mel, you're being very modest, because Mel, not only have you gone into places that most people are trying to leave, but you've also been a TEDx speaker. You've earned Peabody and Edward R. Murrow Awards. You have multiple Emmy nominations to your name. You were recognized by the World Economic Forum. So please don't be modest. You are super accomplished and you have a wonderful message to share. I know all of this work of your career has informed your understanding not only of how the world works, but of how we can connect better together as humans. So would love for you to share more about that.
Thank you, Yvonne. That's a very kind, introduction, and I'll take it. There's a lot of clanking around my neck from those accolades, but I take them all as a privilege, that it has been my privilege that for over 20 years for BBC News, I got to travel to some of the extremes of human experience. And that what I learned there was that uncertainty is just a fact, that we are always in uncertainty and flow. Some could describe it as flow. And it is how we move through that and what our relationship is with that that will impact the outcome. And that definitely applies here. And the one thing I would say is some of my best output has not been when things were amazing. It has been when everything was an absolute dumpster fire. And I don't know if any of you out there have experienced that. Who here has put together a meeting or an event when everything turned into a dumpster fire and actually the output was like, I can't believe you did that. Wow, that's the best we've ever had. And you're like, I want to go home and curl up in a ball. And the thing I would say is, like, it's okay to curl up in a ball for a short time and climb under a duvet, but you have to get out. You have to move. We have been in a time of uncertainty for a long time, a time of awareness of uncertainty for a long time. And we cannot stay there. We have to get up and we have to move. And that is my big message. Because what I know from having been from Afghanistan to Syria to Zimbabwe to China is that in all of those places, what gets people through is getting up and moving. I wanted to share two sides of the same coin that I have with you today. Very briefly, I want to share with you a couple of things that I think will directly impact how you are moving forward, because I've been working on some trends. And then I want to share a story. The one thing I wanted to say is that when I talk about being a war journalist or a frontline journalist, people always think like, oh, she must be so tough, right? She must be so bad. This is what I spent most of my life doing. Oh, hold on one second. Let me just take Yvonne's slides away. And then you can see I didn't have ghost caps. I tended to look like this. This is me, Melanie Marshall, smiling and in a flak jacket. Yep. That is what my life on the front lines looked like. Very, very rarely. And I hadn't slept in about 40 hours at this point, by the way, so I don't even remember this picture being taken. And again, some of you planning events might remember that feeling. But what we can do in all of these cases is move forward. And as we're moving forward in what I like to call pandemic 2.0, because I think that's what we're in, I'm going to call it the energy pandemic. I think we're going to see two things. We're going to see one, that this whole idea of back to office is actually going to go away a little bit, because we're going to see more people becoming energy agnostic. We're going to see a lot of corporations thinking, what are we going to do? Because the uncertainty is actually only going to get worse over the next 6 to 12 months. And you might think, okay, oh my God, everything's going to be virtual and lots of speakers aren't going to show up. And sure, that might be part of it, that we're going to be looking at virtuals. We're going to be looking at changing events and downsizing and making them local. But we are also seeing what I have seen in all of these places that I have been, which is people need to be together. They need something that brings them together, that they can feel and that they can do. So in each case, we need to give people experiences that matter to them where they are. And that when they walk out afterwards, they can do something. And I'm not talking about takeaways, folks. I mean, like, they can actually go and do something, or they can do it in the room. But I'm going to tell you a story, because that is what I do a lot of the time when I'm speaking. And it's what I love. And I'm not going to tell you a story of me in a flak jacket. I am, though, going to tell you about one of the hardest trips of my career, which I think may resonate with some of you. And this is the story. Yeah, this is one of the hardest trips of my career. Yes, my friends, that is me holding a panda, eating bamboo covered in honey. One of the toughest trips of my life turned into what I have saved on my computer as happiest Mel ever. I went to Chengdu on a very expensive trip where the BBC had spent an awful lot of money. That used to be what they would give me. Really hard trips that cost a lot of money and were reputationally very difficult. And we were supposed to go and do a piece about the middle class that was going to, expose something totally different in a different part of the country. And we, of course, have a difficult relationship with the Chinese government. And we flew there at great expense with a team. And we arrived in Chengdu and we were ready to go. And our main character, think of this as our very expensive keynote speaker, perhaps some sort of a general, went missing and texted us to say, "My girlfriend is busy. I can't do this until she's free." And I thought to myself, well, this is horrible. What am I going to do now? And the end result was that I stopped. I stopped flat and thought, well, I'm not going to call the bosses and tell them that I've wasted 50,000 pounds to not deliver anything. So I took everyone to go and eat. Took the team, much like my ladies here, and we went to have food. And again, you can't underestimate the value of going and sitting down and having something to eat. Feed the body, feed the mind. As we fed the mind, I sat and I was present. I wasn't trying to go into the future where I was fired. I wasn't going into the past where things had worked out differently or where I'd had a different experience. I stayed exactly where I was in Chengdu in Sichuan province with my team and said, what can I do here and now? And aha, it came to me. I could buy time, which I had on our visas, and Sichuan is home to giant pandas. So I said, we're going to give this a day, and we are going to the Giant Panda Breeding Center, which we also didn't have a permit for, but better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. That's what I always say. And off we went to get the giant pandas, where we got there, and I was extremely nice and extremely loving. You won't be surprised to hear. I was so impressed. I said, is there any way we're here? We think what you do is so incredible. Connection, making a moment with people. Lo and behold, they said, we'd love to talk to you. They didn't call anyone in Beijing. Thank God. And off we went. And I actually held, just let me go back to this one. I actually held this giant panda for safety because I was sitting next to a correspondent who was holding it on camera, and I wanted to make sure she wasn't attacked by a giant panda. Now, friends, it is true that actually giant pandas have ripped someone's arm off once, so it wasn't total BS. But we put together a piece that became one of the most watched videos of the year. Millions of views online. 3 minutes of pandas. Myself, my correspondent, my team, we spent the whole day filming with giant pandas, baby pandas. Let's be real, baby pandas. And at the end of the day, we had an amazing product. We kept our cool. We stayed together. We fed the body and the mind. We were present. And because we were present, we were able to see the opportunities, not just the risks. And we delivered something that was actually more magical than we could have imagined. 2 days later, our lovely character and his girlfriend returned. And we also ended up doing karaoke and singing Staying Alive with them late into the night. But that's an entirely different story. What I want you to remember is this. That's a photo montage. That it is possible for you, if you stick in this uncertainty, in this time, to have a baby panda moment. That what seems like the worst possible thing right now could, in the moment, if you are with your team, with people you care about and respect, and in the present, and looking for the opportunities, not just the risks, you could turn into something amazing. That is possible right now. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Baby pandas for the win. And if you want to know about the Straits of Hormuz, I'll send you my white paper on that. That's also possible. But we're coming towards the end of our time now. And with that, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to thank you so much for spending this time with each of us to hopefully glean something. I know that what I will take from what Dr. Heather said is that you need to challenge AI. You need to be working with AI, not just being pacified by it, not just cognitively surrendering to the process. If you want it to be your friend and helping you push forward into a future that feels more like a thread and less like a frayed mess. From Kim, I love, Kim, when you're talking about Rose, I think I'm going to remember Rose. Some of you all will remember that, which is when we find ourselves going to our dark side, to our dark Kermit, if those of you know that meme, then it is time to check in with ourselves. And it's that lead system that you were talking about. Work our way down, just like we would with an engine, until we get back to a place where we are self-regulated and can lead our teams. Yvonne, your ghost gaps is just so brilliant that, and it's chaos that exposes them. And that when we can see them, we are better able to lead from them. I also just think your stories about the layoffs on two sides are just incredible, right? That depth of knowledge is so important. And, I'm not going to say what I'll remember from mine. I obviously remember baby pandas. If any of you out there have any comments or questions, we would love to take questions. If not, I have questions for my fellow ladies. So I'm going to start asking a few questions. If the rest of you want to jump in with some questions, please do, and we will pick them up. So I am going to start with you, Dr. Heather. Tell me this. You said that we need to challenge AI and to work with it. I find my AI, I tell it to do that. And then it still comes back to, oh, wow, that's the most original idea anyone's ever had. And I'm like, no, it's not. So what is a great way to challenge AI and to remind it to stop giving us, to blow and smoke up our own behinds?
You've nailed it, Melanie. AIs are sycophantic by nature. They want to tell you how fabulous and amazing and brilliant you are. So even though we teach it, it still will hallucinate and revert to its sycophantic behavior. That means you need to have a series of what I call it prompt back protocols. That is, you need to have a series of questions you want it to ask you and repeatedly say, challenge my assumptions on this. Give me 3 opposing arguments about this. Give me 3 alternatives to this perfect event day I've created. Give me 3 alternative ways of doing this one interactive breakout session. So by constantly asking it to probe you back, to prompt you back, to question you and to challenge you, that's how you keep it on its toes so that it can keep you on your toes cognitively.
So we need to keep probing. I guess I would ask this. Does it matter if we're polite to our AIs?
Well, I just think it's good manners to be polite.
Yes, you do. I know you're and I ask this only because then we have to go back into real life. And I was thinking about this kid, how do we stay going back to, I can definitely be a Rose, and I know I have been. So it is, what is the fastest way? What do you think is the fastest way back to our better angels?
pushing the pause button is the most underestimated, underused strategy there is. I think we are so quick to react in the moment, but if we can just practice taking a breath before we respond, we are much more likely to avoid the dark side of Rose behavior.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope, right? Because it is always our strengths and our weaknesses, right? These are the things that help us get things done.
That's right.
Yvonne, when I have been in a position where I could see I knew the ghost gaps, and where I was managing people who did not know that they were in a ghost gap, which is awkward.
It is, but it happens in every organization. It's just how organizations are structured that way. You have to have some hierarchy, right? That's always going to create some of those differences.
So if you're trying to do something that is quite time limited, right? So you're trying to plan an event, you're quite time limited, and you realize that you are in a gap. What is one of the best ways? I mean, maybe it isn't the time limited part, maybe it's just over a year. What is one of the best ways to get yourself out of that gap?
Yeah, so the best way to get yourself out of the gaps is to take ownership of the gap and to recognize that you have agency in the system. So that means that if you don't have visibility, you need to find a way to get visibility. If you feel voiceless or like you're not being heard, you need to make yourself heard. And maybe that's easier said than done, but there are ways, even in the context of the workplace, that you can do that. You can raise your hand for projects. You can join an employee resource group. You can have skip level meetings with the person above your boss. There are all kinds of ways that you can make your voice heard, raise your hand, make it known that you want the promotion or a job in another department, whatever it may be. You don't have to be a victim to it if you feel unseen and unheard. So that's my best advice, is literally just to take charge of it.
So it might be joining something like MPI or IASP or going to do things that are going to get you in places where you are going to have more visibility.
Yeah. For meeting planners and entrepreneurs, it's like joining organizations where you can gain more exposure, network with the right people to get you seen, being present on social media, commenting on people's posts and interacting with people online is a great way to get some of that visibility and narrow some of those gaps too, if you feel like you're not quite being seen and heard.
Thank you so much. I wanted to go back to this idea of game, because I was saying about, I drained myself doing your experiment there earlier, Dr. Heather. So what is one way? I mean, I agree with the pause thing about how to get ourselves back to function. But what is one way when we're either dealing with AI or dealing with a bunch of other people that we can make our brains work better?
Yeah. So one of the things you can do that's really simple, and you might not want to hear this. Put your phone down. Just as Kim was talking about pausing, people's minds are blown when I say, what if I could increase your memory capacity by 40% in 5 minutes? And people always want to know that, right? Who doesn't want to increase your memory capacity by 40%? The answer is really simple. Stop multitasking. And this is the biggest multitasking culprit. So really, if you can just stay focused on one thing for a little bit of time, then you actually allocate all of your brain's resources to that one thing, instead of having it divided and separated out into 3 or 4 or 5 different things at one time. And that means all of your brilliant ideas and brilliant energy and everything are focused on the one task at hand. It gets all of you and not just some of you.
It's one of the phrases that I use when I am in charge in the field, which is you can't ride 2 horses with one bloop. Journalists like to use a lot of pirate words. But it's true, right? We used to always say this, you've got to pick a horse and ride it, because that's how you get to your destination, particularly when it is very high pressure and very directional. You got to be like, this is my destination. And that's not that different from like, okay, put it down. Like Candy Crush. Is Candy Crush still a thing? Candy Crush plus Blue Sky plus whatever is going to take you away from the thing that you're trying to do that is already really hard, because somebody's budget just fell off by 20% because oil just spiked again. That is, I would also say, by the way, geopolitics, I know not everyone wants to hear about the Straits of Hormuz or my new favorite, Turkmenistan, but you are going to need to understand it and understand how it applies to your audience and your companies more this year. You just are. It's just going to be that kind of year. But don't worry, it's not all going to be bad news. All sorts of good things are going to happen.
Can I ask you a question, Mel?
Yeah, of course you can. Or I'm going to tell everybody everything's going to be okay, which it is.
Well, and that's what I'm actually going to get to, is that I always take away from you looking for the panda in the dark moments, right? And I think that you're really good at shining a light on what's hopeful, where the optimism lies. And sometimes it's really hard to do that when you're in the heat of the moment. And I wonder if you have any tips on how those of us who are navigating the chaos can maybe raise our heads up a little bit and spot those bright spots.
Well, I always say to look beside you. Like, it is genuinely to look beside you, because often we try to look so far ahead and we cannot really see the horizon. It's why, I'm often bagging on futurists, because we try to make this kind of creation of, oh yes, well, I know what's going to happen in 10 years. And come on, we don't. Nobody saw where we are right now necessarily. But if you look beside you at the team and the people you have, at genuinely the resources you have, that tends to ground people down into something resembling okayness, if not joy. And like, I have seen that at work in teams I've led. I have seen that at work in Gaza. I have seen that at work in China. I've seen that at work all over the place. So I know it is a way forward. Like you asking that, if that answers that question. Yeah. I do think, we're not doomed. Like, one of the things I love about speaking with you all on a regular basis and speaking with the rest of you, is I talk to so many people in so many different industries, which I know the three of you do as well, is human beings are incredibly creative and adaptable. And we find ways to be entrepreneurial within corporations. We find ways to save things that seem completely unsalvageable. We find ways to say, oh my gosh, that to-do list did not get done because I completely melted down and watched Love Never Lies Poland. This was definitely not me the other day. And we create something new and we move forward. I don't know if the four of you have experienced that. Like, we do as human beings, we find those different ways. So I think, that to me is why I have so much confidence in each of the people that are joining us today, anyone who's watching the replay, is that I know that what they are bringing to the table and what the people beside them are bringing to the table, and it might be somebody they meet, someone who's running the AV board who has this like crazy creative idea about what to do because X, Y, and Z went wrong. And like, that will be magic. That will be their baby panda. And I know that happens. So I would love for everyone who's joined us today to think about what you'd like to take away. We'd love to hear it in the comments, not just because we love praise, although I do, but it would be just to kind of, Dr. Heather, tell me if I'm wrong. It helps write it in your memory. It helps go to your hippocampus if you put it down, right? Something like that.
Right. When you actually write something down, that's called generative encoding, and your hippocampus encodes it better. Your brain remembers it better, longer, and more robustly.
You heard it from a scientist. And it means that you're making that effort to create better culture, right, Yvonne?
Yes, if I could unmute myself, I would agree with you 100%, Mel.
And I know, Kim, that you are really determined that we're all going to become better leaders of ourselves, no matter where we are in the process of creating things, right? We all have that ability to kind of manage ourselves, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear from all of you. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. We are going to share a QR code, I will remove my baby pandas. Sorry, one more baby panda with feeling. And we are going to share a QR code here where you can tell us what you think.
There we go.
And along with that, if you fill out the form and give us a little bit of feedback, we'll be happy to send you our cheat sheet on surviving the chaos of 2026.
jump in there. Sorry, somebody. There was a little bit of a snafu there, gang. Jump in there. Tell us what you think. Share the QR code, and yeah, the good, the bad, the ugly. We want to be of service to you. How can we help? How can we be there for all of you? That is what matters most to us as individuals and working together. We are so grateful to have been with you all today, and thank you so much for being here. I'd love to know more from anyone who wants to join us. And with that, though, I'm going to say farewell. And ladies, shall we come off mute and all say a noisy farewell?
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.